Hello, welcome to this out and about edition of Talking Europe. We have now hopped back across the border into France. This is the historic town of Wissembourg in Alsace, a town that actually used to be part of Germany. It's changed hands between Germany and France 6 times in just under 400 years. Well, back to the main theme of the programme though. While Germany is a big agriculture player in Europe, France is even bigger. Almost half of its land is given over to farming, and France is the #1 recipient of EU farm subsidies. Well, that means people here pay particularly close attention to how those subsidies might be changing. Let's take you now to meet one of them, a man who is one of thousands of farmers who are challenging mainstream thinking on how our food is produced. Well, here we are then in the fields of Alsace with the Secretary General of the Confédération Paysanne of Alsace, Daniel Stark. Hello there.
Hello.
My first question to you is, can you explain to us this concept of a paysan, which is little known among the general public? In English, it sort of translates as peasant or maybe smallholder.
For me, a paysan is someone who has a job to do that is part of the landscape in the land where they farm. So they have to deal with the specific conditions of the land around them and try to produce something of value from it. That is to say, produce food, preferably healthy food, whilst respecting the local conditions of the land.
OK, well, let's take a walk through your field, and I'd like to know a bit more about what you grow here and what products you produce.
My main crops are wheat and spelt. We use the cereals to produce flour, and then we can make bread with the flour. When I rotate these crops, I also grow pulse or legume crops, things like clover, alfalfa, peas, field beans, things which can help enrich the soil or provide a cover crop for the soil when I'm not growing wheat, because I can't grow cereals all the time.
In this programme, we've been talking about the European Union's greening efforts. Can you tell us how you've experienced that?
I would say they're taking very small steps in the right direction, but obviously it hasn't produced much of an effect for the moment. I think that one of the problems is that from the farming world's point of view, everything like this always seems to be a restriction or a rule that hasn't been thought through, and sometimes you can be punished if you don't respect them.
And you've had problems, for example, with these trees which grew naturally in land that you were setting aside?
In the past, the Common Agricultural Policy pushed farmers to pull up trees on a plot of land like this if they wanted to receive all of the aid for the land. That was madness. And now it's gone the other way, and that type of farming and this landscape are no longer supported by the CAP.
All right, well, I'd like to take you and our viewers back to the farm shop now, have a look at some of those products and continue our discussion.
Okay.
Daniel, I just wanted to talk about the supply chains which were impacted during the COVID pandemic, of course. You're right next to the German border, which was shut for a time. A lot of people were looking for more local produce. Do you feel that's a phenomenon that's going to continue on?
I hope so. I think that people have understood better the link between food and farm. They've seen the link is quite simple. The land produces food, it employs the farmers, and it feeds us all.
Just looking into the future, in an ideal world, if you could tell the European Union where you wanted them to be putting their agriculture subsidies, what would you say?
Today there are farmers, consumers, and the agro-industry in the middle. There are 3 separate blocks, and in a way they are trapped. So for me, it's about encouraging the link between producer and consumer. That's the most important policy aim, and the rest will follow, because we're all on the same side.
Daniel Stark, thank you so much for meeting us for our programme.
Merci.
Well, here we are then among the fruit trees. These are cherries, and this is a member of the European Parliament. Anne Sander, very nice to meet you.
Bonjour.
And I would say for our viewers, you're a member of the European People's Party group, which is the biggest group in the European Parliament, and it's on the centre-right of politics. So let's take a walk through these cherry trees, Anne Sander. What's your point of view on EU greening policies up to now, how well that's worked for the environment and what it's meant for farmers?
We can now see that this greening was not popular amongst farmers because it was forced on them. There was no policy of incentives to encourage participation. So we really have to change the common agricultural policy and change our environmental ambitions, and especially the way they are implemented.
I know that in a recent European Parliament debate, you said that you want the next strategy, which is all to do with sustainability, you want that to be both coherent and realistic if it's going to work. What do you mean by that?
Of course, our ambition is for our agriculture and our food to be healthy, clean, and respectful of the environment. But nevertheless, we have to recognize that those two strategies will lead to a reduction in agricultural production of 15%. So yes, we are doing something, but in that case, we have to be coherent about how and where we obtain our food supplies to compensate for the fall in production. And that means with produce that comes from outside the European Union. And so we can't meet our target if those products don't respect our standards and aren't produced locally. Because the COVID crisis has shown us very clearly, people want more food to be produced and consumed locally.
Well, there are lots of arguments going on right now about lots of aspects of the future of farming in Europe. I'd like to watch a report now together with you and with our viewers. This is about how lobby groups in Brussels are making different voices heard. Alix Le Bourdon has made this report for us.
"20 years ago, Hugues Felice decided to change his farming techniques and go green.
This is a fully organic, self-sufficient cattle breeding farm.
Today, Hugues is an active defender of environmentally friendly modes of production with the trade union FUGEA. But though his farm is not far from Brussels, geographically speaking, he says the European institutions aren't listening.
There are never any meetings organised between us and the European Commission or the Parliament. Apart from a few individual initiatives from MEPs with connections to farming, who are generally in tune with our ideas and our messages.
But he's not giving up. FUGEA joined 400 green farming unions from across Europe in presenting a joint letter to EU agriculture ministers as they met for a summit on the 1st of September. But they are small fry compared to the confederation that defends big agribusiness, the mighty COPA-COGECA. Its representatives were much in evidence at the summit, lobbying for those farmers' interests.
It is really important for us to make an impact assessment, how these packages, this Green Deal, overarching sustainability initiative would have an impact on agri-food chain, how that would impact our food security, how that would impact our competitiveness.
The need to preserve food security is an argument also dear to the pesticides lobby. With glossy leaflets and a verdant logo, the European Crop Protection Association is striving to promote its green credentials.
We've launched a series of 6 commitments centred around 3 different axes. The first one is innovation and investment. The second priority is a circular economy, because it's essential to reduce environmental pollution. And the last point is, of course, protecting people and the environment, because we want a greener future for our rural communities and our planet.
Rhetoric that is all too familiar to Nina Holland. For 10 years, she's been analysing the behaviour and tactics of the various lobbies in the field of agriculture.
The corporations are organised by sector in lobby federations. So you will first have statements by the pesticide industry, by the food industry, not saying abolish the Green Deal. They will not say that. They will want to seem green and support green goals. But then in the meantime, they will say, but take care, don't go too fast, make sure that you don't hurt economic sectors.
Nina is convinced that the lobbies used the pandemic as an excuse to postpone consideration of environmental proposals. Some members of the European Parliament's Agriculture Committee did argue for the debate to be put off. But its chair says that wasn't under pressure from lobbyists.
When you are in the middle of a crisis, you cannot negotiate the CAP files, and on the other hand, I had doubts that this is the right time to present new visions for the agriculture sector for the next 10 years, like the farm to fork and the biodiversity strategy. But since May, they are on the table.
Environmental protection is at the heart of Europe's new farming policies, and one of the key preoccupations of powerful interest groups.
Well, let's come back now to our MEP, Anne Sonder. Anne, do you believe that lobbies in Brussels are stopping the EU from becoming greener?
Decision makers need to be informed and to stay in contact with the reality on the ground, like I often do by meeting with farmers like here. But above all, MEPs like me have to make up our own minds with all of the information at our disposal, so we can decide where we stand and what we want to defend.
The European Commission President recently set a new target for cutting greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2030, more ambitious than previously. Given that agriculture, forestry and land are responsible for a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions in Europe, is this new target doable?
It's a noble ambition, but we have to be realistic in the execution. There needs to be the necessary support. It needs to be coherent. It needs to be shared, with the same rules across the European Union. And above all, everything that comes from outside the European Union has to contribute to the same goals as those inside the EU. Otherwise, we won't succeed.
And for all environmental issues, sustainability, there is going to be less money. We know that already. The agriculture budget will be smaller than the previous one. How much harder does that make it?
That really is my biggest concern. The Common Agricultural Policies funds are set to be reduced in the next budget, a reduction of 10% at least. So we're going to have to use that money better, perhaps by making sure that the money is better exploited. And we're going to have to invest more in research, in precision farming. That's how we'll be able to reach our goals.
De précision, justement pour qu'on puisse arriver à atteindre ces objectifs.
Anne Sonder, thank you so much for your time.
And thanks to you.
Well, let's look now at a very different kind of farming, one that's really gaining traction in this eastern region of France and elsewhere. We're talking about a growth in medicinal plants. Mathilde Benezet has been to check it out for us.
High up in the Vosges Mountains in eastern France, the Gardens of Bernadette is full of secrets. Barely a hectare in size, it's full of the treasures of medicinal and aromatic plants. Alain Grandmanche has been in charge for 11 years.
We grow around 40 species of plants, and we harvest another 10 or so from the wild too.
The Gardens of Bernadette grow organic plants. That means they can benefit from a tax credit from the French state for organic producers. But for Alain, applying for the EU's Common Agricultural Policy subsidies is more of a headache than a help.
The aid depends on the size of the farm, and we are a very small farm with not much land, so there's not much use in bothering with all the paperwork.
Alain sells most of his plants and produce in the farm shop, but a small chunk is reserved for Phytodia Laboratories, a specialist in organic beauty lotions, the fruit of research into the natural properties of plants. Today, Phytodia's director, Régis Saladin, is interested in the wild rosehip.
Oh, the fruit looks good.
Yes, it would be good to analyse them to see if there is more vitamin C in these ones or in the ones that grow in the lowlands.
Yes, it would be good to compare them.
All of Phytodia's plant extracts are organic and sourced in the Vosges and Alsace. For Régis, it's a question of why look further afield when the answers can be found nearby.
We could go looking for our active ingredients at the other end of the world, but we often have a local equivalent.
The problem with plants is that it often is driven by marketing, and marketing really loves having exciting stories to tell. They think it's better to have acai from Brazil or orchids from China because it's a better sales pitch.
Perhaps surprisingly, the local option is rarely the cheapest. The French plants that Phytodia uses cost up to 4 times more than imported varieties. Indeed, in France, 3/4 of plants used medicinally are sourced from abroad. But higher costs are offset by closer proximity to the crop for researchers.
With Régis, we were curious to know whether cultivated arnica and wild arnica were identical.
The more you pamper a plant, the more beautiful it is, but it's less active. Most plants, including arnica, produce molecules to defend themselves, and those are the molecules that often have a therapeutic value.
To answer whether that wild arnica is indeed more potent, the harvested plants are taken to the Phytodia labs in Alsace for closer examination. Here, it's a collection of high-tech horticultural history.
In here we have a bit over 10 years' work. That's 2,500 extracts. I have the entire catalogue of French plants. So if I need a plant or a fruit that has antioxidant properties, it's in there.
This fridge represents a glimpse of the past and the future. Synthetic molecules have dominated science for the past century, but now researchers are learning from nature again.
Without a doubt, humans think that they're more intelligent than nature by saying we can find other molecules that nature hasn't invented yet. But I don't think that the results are very convincing. One molecule that is used in the most common chemotherapy treatments in the world is an extract from the bark of the yew tree. And it's a treatment that's still being used in chemotherapy today.
Phytodia is currently working on a plant extract that could help combat how the coronavirus penetrates cells. The natural properties of plants could yet be a vital weapon in the world's struggle to overcome the pandemic.
Well, that brings us to the end of this programme from France and Germany. Of course, European farm policy will continue to evolve long after these fields have been replanted and re-harvested. We'll follow the developments for you on France 24. Hope to see you soon.